Hello, and a very good afternoon once again from the United States, and Chicago to be more precise. You join me outside of Union Station, just a few blocks away from the Sears Tower, or I guess officially the Willis Tower as no one calls it. This evening, we'll be heading east to the country's capital, Washington D.C, aboard what I think could well be Amtrak's most underrated train. But before all that, let's head into Chicago's Union Station and see what it has to offer. Now, regular viewers of the channel will be well aware by now that I am a big fan of the station here in Chicago. I think that the architecture here is just absolutely stunning and sort of encapsulates the now long gone glory days of rail travel in the United States. Union Station originally opened back in 1925 and is a major hub for Amtrak and its long-distance rail services. Now, while I think the Great Hall here would be a perfectly suited place to kill the next couple of hours while we wait for our train, I am travelling in a Roomette tonight, which naturally grants me lounge access. We'll head to the lounge in just a moment, but first, I thought I'd briefly show you the station's food court. It contains all the usual suspects that you might have expected, such as a McDonald's and a Chick-fil-A, as well as a small shop and, being British, what I would describe as a sort of pub. Anyway, my back's killing me from lugging around my heavy rucksack, so I think it's time we headed to the lounge. While a comfortable place to wait and aesthetically somewhat pleasing, if not perhaps a bit bland, the food offering in the lounge is actually pretty insulting in my opinion. Considering that this lounge is mainly used by sleeping car passengers who have usually forked out an arm and a leg for their tickets, offering pre-packaged cakes and cup noodles just doesn't really cut it for me. Anyway, the time soon comes to head down to the platform to board our train. With Amtrak, I've found that boarding usually commences around half an hour prior to departure. By the way, the train we'll be taking this evening is Amtrak's appropriately named Capital Limited service, train number 30, which leaves Union Station for, well, Union Station, in Washington that is, at 6:40 PM daily. Now, sleeping car passengers are supposed to get priority boarding. However, I didn't see any evidence of this, although, if I'm being honest, there should really be no need for it. This massive queue is partly the result of the time it takes staff to assign coach passengers a seat. Now, why Amtrak can't just assign a seat at booking is just beyond me. It would just save so much time and hassle, especially considering that sleeping car passengers already get their accommodations assigned instantly upon making their booking. At long last though, we do reach our sleeping car at the very front of the train. For its Capital Limited service, unlike most eastbound services where they use their single-decker Viewliner coaches, Amtrak uses their iconic double-decker Superliner coaches here. We'll be travelling in room 2 this evening, which is on the upper level of the car. And here it is, our home for the next 17.5 hours or so. These roomettes can accommodate 2 people at a squeeze, or provide spacious quarters for a solo traveller, as you'll never be made to share with strangers on Amtrak. We'll take a look around the roomette, and the rest of the train for that matter, in the morning. But for now, let's take a seat and see where we'll be heading tonight. We'll head eastbound after leaving Union Station, crossing from Illinois and into Indiana just a short time after departing. We'll then go on to travel through Ohio and Pennsylvania, before having 2 stints in Maryland, separated by a couple of hours in West Virginia, before finally arriving into Washington D.C. and its Union Station, where we're scheduled to arrive at 1:05 tomorrow afternoon. Scheduled travel time is 17 hours and 25 minutes, and this trip will see us covering a distance of 780 miles or 1,255 kilometers. And we depart Chicago on time at 6:40 PM. As we make our way out of Chicago, we're treated to a spectacular sunset, which is a fantastic way to cap off what has been a beautiful day. As I'm sat here editing these clips over a year later, it is really making me long for the day that I return to the US. After being treated to that glorious sunset, it's time for a, well, somewhat less glorious meal. Amtrak only offers its flexible dining service on the Capital Limited, which consists of these rather lackluster steamed meals. While the chicken al rosa I went for certainly tasted good, I always find that the flexible dining portions are on the small side, and fall way short of the traditional dining offering that Amtrak has on some of its headline westbound long-distance trains. That said, dinner does still include a drink of your choice, including alcohol, and one upside of flexible dining is that it's possible to have your meals served to your room, which we took advantage of, as opposed to having to go to the dining car to eat. After dinner, with it now being dark outside and rather late, we decide to turn in for the night. We awake the following morning to find that we're out in the wilderness and approaching the Appalachian mountain range. It's the scenery in the morning as we trundle our way towards the capital that I think makes this possibly Amtrak's most underrated train. Now sure, it's not quite going to rival the likes of the California Zephyr or the Coast Starlight, but there are still some really rather spectacular sights to be seen on this train. Breakfast soon rolls around and I went for the railroad French toast. Again, it was nice enough, but not really a meal worthy of the hundreds of dollars that Amtrak charges sleeping car passengers to travel on this train. Right, with breakfast out of the way, let's see what these roomettes have to offer. These roomettes feature the usual setup, with two seats facing one another. These seats are configured to form the pretty spacious lower berth on a night, with the much more cramped upper berth folding down from the ceiling. A lockable door and a privacy curtain are also provided, so you don't need to worry about people looking into your roomette, although note that the door can only be locked from the inside, not the outside. The seats themselves are actually really comfortable, and the legroom is great if you're on your own, but definitely a bit cramped if you're sharing. Although these seats are very wide, so it's certainly possible to rest your feet next to your travel buddy, providing you're well enough acquainted, that is. Between the seats, you'll find this rather flimsy fold-out table. Note that while it's marked out for checkers and chess, pieces for this aren't provided because who doesn't take their chess pieces with them on holiday? Each roomette only has one power outlet, so I'd definitely recommend bringing some sort of strip plug like I have. In terms of lighting options, each seat has a reading light, as does the upper berth, and there is a bigger main light, although I've always found that these don't really do a great job of lighting these roomettes. Thankfully though, there are also volume controls for the PA system, so you don't have to worry about being bombarded with the seemingly constant announcements that they make on these trains. And lastly, you'll also find a couple of coat hangers, as well as a couple of small face towels. Overall, while these roomettes are undeniably quite comfortable, it's also apparent that they're in dire need of a facelift, as they're really beginning to show their age. As for the other onboard facilities, while there is one on the upper level, most of the toilets are located on the lower level, next to where you'll find the accessible bedroom. Generally, Amtrak do a good job of maintaining the sleeping car's toilets, and that was certainly the case here, which is good to see. Roomette passengers also have access to this shower on the lower level. I always think that this is a nice little luxury to have on a train, and I found that both the temperature of the water and the pressure were good. In the centre of the coach, you'll find self-service coffee making facilities in the morning, which I thought was a nice touch. Now, sadly, these trains don't have a proper dining car, but rather have this half first class lounge, half cafe car setup. Also, it would appear that there's no proper sightseer lounge car on the Capital Limited anymore, which is a shame as there was when I travelled on this train in 2019. And then at the back of the train we have some coach seating, although it's worth noting that coach can get very busy on the Capital Limited. And lastly, Amtrak's Superliner trains aren't Wi-Fi enabled, which I always think is a bit strange. But apparently they trialled this in the past and it didn't work that well, so make of that what you will.
Car behind the cafe car and wait downstairs for the employees' further instructions. Please do not open any windows and doors unless otherwise instructed by an employee.
Well, while the scenery as we get closer to Washington is rather nice, the weather is anything but, and seemingly got worse and worse the closer we got to the capital. At long last, we start running alongside Washington Metro trains, signifying that our journey is nearly at an end, so it's time to whack up the chart and summarise the experience. While dated, these roomettes are fairly comfy. The seats are very spacious, although it is a little on the cramped side if there are two of you sharing. The beds were a little bit firm, but generally okay in terms of comfort as sleeper trains go, aided in part by the pretty decent bedding that Amtrak provides. For Amtrak's roomettes, I think a 7.5 out of 10 would be fair in the comfort category. As for the amenities, well, they were a bit more hit and miss. While the toilets were well appointed and kept clean, and the onboard shower was certainly appreciated, these trains are just so horribly outdated. The fact that there's only one plug socket per roomette really highlights this for me, and a long distance train not having Wi-Fi in this day and age seems a bit barbaric to me. While the meals were okay, they certainly weren't up to the standard I'd expect from the high ticket prices that Amtrak demands to travel in its sleeping cars. And just spare a thought for a moment for the coach passengers, as their only food option was the slop that they serve in the cafe car, and trust me from experience, the cafe car food makes even the flexible dining meals served in sleeper look gourmet. I had a hard time rating the amenities, but I'd say that they'd land somewhere between poor and fair. As for occupancy, pretty much every room in the sleeping cars were occupied, and coach seemed to be pretty busy too. That said, as you'd like to hope for such a long distance train, even if you're travelling in coach, your ticket guarantees you a seat. So, while not really relevant for passengers travelling in the sleeping cars, as if you find it too busy in the common areas, you could, just lock yourself away in your roomette or bedroom. Using my scoring system, I'd put occupancy at medium. When it comes to punctuality, it's hardly surprising that delays are quite common. In the year up to the 15th of May 2023, Amtrak was scheduled to operate this service every day except Christmas Day. So, of the 364 services operated within that year time frame, only 167 or 46% arrived on time. 10 services, or around 3%, were cancelled outright, with the remaining 187 services arriving into Washington with an average delay of 1 hour and 26 minutes. So, while I'd say you probably shouldn't count on your train being on time, it is at least unlikely that your train is going to be cancelled outright. Which finally brings us onto the cost, and tickets are quite frankly ludicrous, starting at $643 one way for a solo traveller in a roomette. That's nearly $1 per mile, which is just absolutely insane. Coach, however, is a lot more reasonable, starting at just $84 one way, which is about what you'd pay to get an indirect flight in economy class on a low-cost airline. Personally, if I were doing this trip purely just to get from Chicago to Washington, I'd obviously just book a flight and probably fork out for a non-stop one at that, as needless to say, it's way quicker than the train. That said, the views on the train are quite impressive, and certainly surpass those that you'd get at 30 to 40,000 feet. However, needless to say, I don't think forking out for sleeper on just the Capital Limited is worth it. We had a connecting itinerary from Los Angeles to Washington that was $1,350 for 2 people in a roomette, which, while still expensive, isn't quite the daylight robbery that Amtrak charges for 1 person in sleeper on just the Capital Limited. So, those are my views. However, I am, as always, curious to hear your thoughts on this trip in the comments below.
And a privilege. Ladies and gentlemen, when you come downstairs, I'm placing a lot of the luggage on the luggage, off the luggage rack onto the platform. If you do not see it.
With that, all that's left for me to do is to welcome you to a very rainy Washington D.C. and its stunning Union Station, where we arrive at about 20 to 3, which is 1 hour and 35 minutes late, due to various small hold-ups along the way.
Watch your step, folks. Watch your step.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Right, with that, I'm off to go and check into my hotel and explore the US Capitol. However, in the meantime, I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to give it a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, as all of them help me out immensely. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon so that you get notified each and every time I upload. A special thanks, as always, goes to my fantastic patrons and channel members. If you want to join them in supporting the channel, all while getting ad-free access to my videos, you can do so from just £1, $1, or €1 per month. You'll find the relevant links in the description below. With that, all that's left for me to say is thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you all next Friday.